Hi guys, hi, hello, good morning. Welcome back from break. I hope you had a nice week off. I can be able to relax, unplug as much as possible. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be continuing with our Unit 3, our discussions of India. When we left off before the break, we had talked about our last major, Indian empire, the Mughals, and how they'd kind of fallen to bits, again, as their last major leader passed away, our last successful leader passed away, with leaving his son behind, and things did not go well for them overall. So they start to crumble, to become more vulnerable. So the person or people, I suppose, who are going to come in and take advantage of this decline of India in the strength that they had before are going to be the British. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background for how exactly do the British make headway in such a large place. Again, most of their colonies up to this point again had been pretty, I don't know, limited, I suppose. By the time India is established, the New World is established, so on and so forth. And regardless, the Brits are going to come through. We're going to talk a little bit what it was like having the British control India, how things start to heat up and get a little bit dicey, again, leading to eventually a widespread independence movement. At the end of today, I've got some work to be again completed. You have really two things left to be done by the end of the week. One which I'll post again once this is up. And then the other is to complete your study aid because this unit comes to a close on Friday. So without further ado, have your notebooks out, ready to go, and let's begin. So we're going to talk a little bit about, like I said, some background of how did the British end up in India. When they first arrived, it's around 1650, and it starts as most European influence goes, just economic. They wanted to control the products coming in and out of India as much as possible. Remembering that India is rife with really exotic and important items, specifically in the form of spices. Again, spices are prevalent throughout India and something that is very sought after by the rest of the world. The two places that our trading ports are going to be located is in Calcutta, which is modern-day Kolkata, and then Madras, which is modern-day Chennai. Again, when the British arrived, there was a lot of resistance to them. They're outsiders trying to force their way in. There's a lot of competition amongst the Indian people themselves, as well as other Europeans who had been there. There was the French also trying to make some headway into India. The French, as far as an empire goes, is much limited in comparison to the British. It's something they never really kind of get the hold of, I would say. Again, they make a lot of footholds in Southeast Asia, but not a lot of other places in the world. Africa, a little. It's kind of it. The Indians, too, like I said, they are hoping to keep their land. They keep losing it to various different people in charge and things like that, and they want to have control. So what ends up happening is that the British, the crown, again, the government of Great Britain, they don't want to take control of India outright. It's a huge, massive undertaking and something that, again, if they can just have influence economically, they should be okay. So instead of sending the whole colonial army there to take over, they develop a relationship with the East India Trading Company. And that might sound kind of familiar, and that symbol on this slide might a little bit if you've ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean. Again, Jack Sparrow had worked for them at one point. Again, a very off sort of tangent, random connection, but one that always jumps out to me. So what ended up happening is with the establishment of this trading company, they started to take more political and economic power because the Mughal Empire was falling apart, and they were basically saying like, oh, well, we'll give you money, or we'll make sure that you get some of this back. You don't have to worry about it. Leave it to us. And slowly but surely, from the trading post, they start to move inward, getting more and more land under their control and more people under their control. Like I said, they're trying to cut out the middleman tier. They want to make as much money as possible, and they can't do that if they have to buy from Indian suppliers. They want to have it and own it themselves. So what they ended up doing is, because they're a they're a trading company. They're not a country. They don't have an army. Is that they had to build one, and what they utilized were these these people referred to as sepoys. There were Indian soldiers basically for hire, and they were hired to protect the company's interests, to fight off any kind of threat. Yes, this is something that is really interesting, like I said, because with the British East India Company, like I said, it starts as an economic venture. Eventually, though, it's going to become a full-blown colony of the British Empire. And that takes a while. They seem to exist fine, again, throughout, again, I would probably say like 150 years. That's a long time to have the British there and present. And then things start to turn a little bit as, again, the Indian people start to push back against the control of the British as it has gotten so large. And it isn't until 1935, after a prolonged fight for independence, that the British will start to negotiate with the Indian people, and they won't be fully independent until 1947. So it's important to understand that India is, in one way or another, under the influence of the British for 300 odd years. So what does that mean? Again, through this process, through this, again, whole idea of British rule, again, what does it mean to be ruled by the British, whether it is just through the East India Company or through the actual colonial government? So we're going to talk about costs, and then we'll talk about benefits. So the costs. Of course, some people are going to get really filthy, stinking rich through this process of having the British, a massive international, global economic empire, make connections here. But only a small group of those are going to be Indians. The rest will be British expat people who are going to be put into India to reap most of the benefits. Another cost is going to be that the British manufactured goods, the things that they can create in factories through the process of mass production, it makes the way that the Indian economy was creating goods useless. It absolutely destroys people who worked with their hands and made things themselves, because British manufactured goods were way cheaper. Another cost is that the Indian again, they had to pay taxes to the British, again, money that was going to be going to them. And sometimes the people who took advantage are going to take very much advantage of them. They had to switch from agriculture that produced food to cotton production, because that's what the British needed from the Indian people, is they needed cotton. By the time we get into the late 1700s, 1800s, well, the cotton supply of America has changed as far as relationship goes, because we're independent and we're going to, again, ask for much more money. So India becomes the cotton source for the British Empire because of this forced switch. The people of India don't have enough food. Again, in any colonial situation, again, almost exclusively, the native people, the people of India, are always going to be treated less than to the colonial rulers, always second class, no matter the amount of education they get or even the wealth that they earn. The other thing about the British is that when they arrive to India, they have very little regard for the culture of India. As we've talked over the last couple of weeks, India has created a really rich and many layered kind of culture through the development of multiple religions, through the creation of a social system, all of that stuff. And the British, they just, again, they're like this with everybody. They think that because they're different, they're less than. One really big example that stands out to me always is the fact that the Taj Mahal, which we talked about before break, one of the most beautiful buildings in all of the world. Yeah, the British just throw parties in it. It's a tomb. It's a again, a memorial to a woman who was important to the leaders of India, and the British just treated it like another fancy palace, which is so not cool. It's not all bad. I mean, the British, by the time that they get to India, have a pretty good track record for how to manage colonies. Even though it's not a full-blown colony yet, I keep getting ahead of myself. So what they do provide is a sort of order and stability. With the Mughals declining, things were pretty chaotic in India. So by creating a fairly honest and efficient new system, it allowed for people to know what was right, what was wrong, without having to guess. There's a new school system that's put into place. Of course, they're going to force the people of India to learn English, because if you don't learn English in a colonial setting, well, you can't be successful. They do improve infrastructure. They build roads and canals, railroads, all that kind of stuff. They will, again, provide certain advancement opportunities. Of course, they're always going to be kind of looked at a second, but they do provide it. So universities will be built, medical centers, a lot of jobs. They're not great jobs. Most of them are menial or low skill labor, but a lot of jobs are out there. They create a postal service. All that kind of stuff is available to the Indian people under the British rule. So as time goes on, okay, the East India Company, it continues to expand their influence and to impose their laws and their way of basically living. The people of India are working through it. Okay. And the first time that the people of India sort of push back against the influence of the British is referred to as the Sepoy Mutiny or the Great Mutiny. It's looked at as the first war of independence. So we're going to talk about causes. We'll talk about effects. Obviously, this is all important. Again, causes is more description, I suppose. And then effects is more why is it important. So with causes, you have this growing distrust amongst the people of India and the British. Well, the Sepoys, again, this fighting force for the British, are working, being assigned, they're going to be given new weapons. And the thing that's really important to understand about this is the cartridge itself. So the actual, again, bullet and powder overall, again, way to load the weapon. These new cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat. And again, that was commonplace because you needed to be able to load them quickly, so on and so forth. The problem with this and why it was such a huge deal, because really, I mean, what does this mean? Is that cows, again, are considered sacred to the Hindu people. They do not eat cows. They don't only use them for things that they're going to give willingly. Again, it's an important aspect or fundamental truth of Hinduism. Pigs cannot be consumed by Muslims. These are the two major religions of India at this time. All the sepoys were one or the other. And in order to use these cartridges, you had to bite off the end of it to load the rifle. Of course, the sepoys, who, again, are going to put their belief system over that of again, this random company that might be paying them, they refuse. They're going to be charged with, again, breaking contract. They'll be publicly humiliated. They're imprisoned. And this really sets off a chain reaction of frustration into violence. What we're going to see here is that during this mutiny, it's sort of this rising up on both sides, which is really violent. It's really fast. It's not an extended war, I suppose. Unfortunately, in the end, the sepoys are going to be defeated because they never figure out who's going to be in charge. So it sort of falls apart, but it does have a big impact overall. So what ends up happening is that after the Sepoy Mutiny, the East India Trading Company is going to be kind of dismissed and the British Crown is going to come in officially. They're going to enter into India and be like, yeah, we were just sort of in control of you before. Now we're really in control of you. Queen Victoria will be named Empress of India. Officially, it'll become a colony of Great Britain. And really, again, that's the immediate change, is that India goes from being a part of the empire to being a major part of the empire, I suppose. The long-term effects that this has is that the Sepoy Mutiny showed the Indian people that they didn't have to sit back and just take what the British were giving them, that if they wanted to, they could work together and try and push back. It fueled the ideas of Indian nationalism. I would definitely encourage you guys to look up that definition again of nationalism. It's important, not just in this unit, but in the next coming ones. Again, it inspires new generations to rise up. It showed the British as well that if they just sat back on their laurels, that the Indians could, again, make a big to-do about this. It could be the, again, North America all over again. And they definitely didn't want that. So they stepped up their control over the subcontinent of India. As I said, what we're going to see here is that because of this shift, the people of India start to get organized. This is almost like always the first step in the process of trying to push back and win independence or to make a big change, is that the people who are paying attention, who have the means and the, again, abilities, are going to organize into something specific. So we're going to talk about the Indian National Congress. After the Sepoy Mutiny, they're going to be created. When they first are, again, around, the INC, which should sound kind of sort of familiar if you think back to Africa. Again, the upper class and English educated. They're all of the higher classes of Indian society, the ones who had managed to make more money and have more education, usually living in cities, so on and so forth. Excuse me. And then the INC, instead of a full-blown revolution, they started by just wanting to change the process. They wanted to work with the British. They wanted to create some kind of sharing of power as opposed to just being told what to do. They did also believe that there should be no divide in that gaining of power, that there should be no difference between Hindus and Muslims. With that said, the INC was mostly Hindu. They were Indian Hindus. It's the majority population at that time. Muslims, feeling left out, ended up forming their own league, and we'll talk a little bit about them later on. Okay, so the INC is working in India, trying to make change, and things are going really poorly. not a lot of change is happening. And into this new movement walks one of my favorite people from history, which is Mohandas, or Mahatma Gandhi. You've all seen pictures of him. He's the cutest little Indian man you've ever seen, with his little round glasses and his mustache, teeny tiny little guy. And he is going to see what is happening in his country, and he wants to help. He wants to change things. He wants the people of India to be free, to be able to make their own decisions. And when he emerges onto the scene, he really changes the whole game because, like I said, the INC was all about trying to make changes within. Gandhi is trying to force changes, but not in the typical way that we've seen in some other independence movements that rely a lot on violence and fighting. He is an entirely non-violent movement. So what he is going to rely heavily on is the idea of civil disobedience, which is breaking laws that you think are not right. Of his typical sort of ways of doing this are through boycotts. Again, basically refusing to buy British goods, which cripples the economy of the British Empire. They staged protest marches. He went on hunger strikes. Again, time and time again, he'd be arrested. But every time he was arrested, every time he went through one of these different demonstrations, more and more people of India started to buy into this, to kind of get on board with, okay, we need independence. We can't have the British be in charge of us forever. The British, of course, they know that if they go toe-to-toe with the Indian subcontinent, that they're outnumbered, number one, and that, again, if Mahatma Gandhi gets more and more getting followers, that it'll be so difficult to get them to ultimately, again, give up. So they do make some changes. They kind of work with the INC, and they are going to open up the government to Indian participation. They give the vote to the people of India. They allow them to have representation, but they keep taxing the crap out of the people of India, and they just can't. Again, the country itself is quite poor in comparison, but they keep increasing taxes, especially on things as important as salt. And we're going to talk specifically about the Salt March tomorrow. But it does really change the whole process because even with these small wins, the voting representatives, the INC recognizes that they're never going to give them what they need. So they need full-blown independence if they're going to be able to win this whole fight. So I know that's kind of a lot for today. Again, we'll be able to finish up in the next 2 days, and then I'll give you a day off to be able to review and do what you gotta. So hopefully this isn't too stressful for you guys to be able to get this all done here. So before we're finished, quickly, we've got work to be completed. Your notes can go away. As far as work, like I said, you've got 2 things to complete by the end of the week, so space it out accordingly. One is going to be the source activity that we always do every unit. This time it's going to be obviously different because it's not in person, so I can't collect anything from you. This is going to be about what happens to India after they win independence. Spoiler alert, they definitely win, but it doesn't go as smoothly as it could have. You can work on this now. Again, tomorrow this will make more sense after the lecture. It's your call when you want to start it. Of course, it'll be on Classroom for you to be able to utilize. It'll make more sense after tomorrow. I would suggest waiting, but that's your call. The other thing that you need to keep working on, of course, to be completed by the end of the week is your Unit 3 study aid. Again, that one is going to be through Turnitin.com. The Read Like a Historian is on Classroom through Google Forms. So you just submit it there. You don't submit it to Turnitin, okay? On Friday, you're going to have your test. Again, I'll talk more about it as we get closer, but you're going to be completing your Unit 3 test online. Just like we've done it in the past, but of course this is slightly different because you're going to be at home. It'll be on Skyward. Again, you're going to be allowed to use your notes. Again, the thing about this is that there's no way to do corrections or anything after the fact. Don't forget that Friday also means the end of the unit, so you need to turn everything in. Again, submit it to Turnitin, especially look at the Skyward posts. If it is got a 0 on it, but you've done it, you need to turn it into Turnitin.com if you want me to, again, grade it for any kind of credit. So please make sure that that is happening. If you have questions, please let me know, and I will see you I will talk to you guys tomorrow.